Racial projects. So one of the ways we begin to understand the distinction between race and racism is to think about this within a framework of what we call racial projects, right? Um, and so racial projects do the ideological and practical work of making the links between social structure and race. And this helps us understand the connection between the two, right? And so when we think about our project, we basically um, think about it from the distribution of goods, right? So we think about it from the kind of distribution of goods. And so um, in this way, racial formation, so the extension of racial meaning, so again, the extension of whiteness to um, Irish or the Italians or any, or quite honestly, we're going to talk about Jews here in a little bit. All of this stuff is a part of a particular kind of process. So whiteness in and of itself is a part of racialization. Um, and so again, it's an interpretation and a representation, explanation of racial identities in an effort to distribute resources along particular lines. So if we're thinking about different examples of racial projects, um, there are some things that should come to mind when we think about what kind of goods and services are offered with respect to race. Voting rights comes to mind, right? So we see here, this is a cartoon, political cartoon that comes up during Reconstruction, where you see this separate line for African and Black people, right, in one space, and white folks in another, and the guy with the gun trying to basically dissuade Black people from voting, right? And so we see the ways in which that's still active today. So we can talk about voting rights as a kind of racial project. We can talk about redlining. So this is a map of Los Angeles. We're literally, the places in red are places where we're devalued because Black people live there, and places that are green are places of high value. If you were to zoom in on this map, you'll see that Beverly Hills and other places where it's still pretty white are the green spaces on there. Um, there have been some changes. For instance, I was looking at this. Santa Monica apparently used to be predominantly Black in the 20s. And that space is totally, I mean, it's ocean view. So they're not, that's high income, high value property right now. So, but again, the point is housing, right? And in this sense, lending is a kind of racial project. So when you talk about banking and home ownership, this also extends to gender, right? And so we can talk about a kind of sexist project. This is an advertisement for a chef and this kind of blender. This guy says the chef does everything but cook. That's what wives are for. This is not a meme. I know it kind of looks like a meme. This is a straight up advertisement for the Kenwood chef. And that is crazy. But it's one I use to talk about other research that I thought was very effective for us to kind of understand this. And so again, for us to notice racial projects operating at the level of everyday life, we just have to notice how often we actually, notice race. And so you can think about how we try to notice gender first, with different kinds of stereotypes and things of that nature. And we all kind of basically, I think, begin to think through how race functions and how we begin to think about these things. One thing that I wanted to talk about with regards to a racial project talks about the ways in which it's kind of pick yourself up by your bootstraps mentality. So you kind of see this cartoon where you see somebody, a Black person that's enslaved. And again, this cartoon it's an analogy. So there are some flaws, but I think it speaks to a deeper truth. You see this white person basically uses a Black person to get up on this ledge. And once you see the Black person says, enough is enough, I'm getting up and no longer a slave. He's, white person's like, hey, I'm really sorry about being racist before. I know better now. So the guy's like, hey, give me a hand. And then the white guy says, of course not. That would be reverse racism. Look, I got up here by myself. Why can't you? So it's the same kind of way in which we talk about this idea of a racial project, meaning this notion of white people working hard for the things that they have, right? That this is kind of common sense understanding of race.